You hand over $300 for a seat, the plane burns thousands of gallons of fuel to carry you across the country. And at the end of it all, the airline keeps about the price of a fast food burger. That number is not a mistake, and it is not an exaggeration. On average, a large airline earns a net profit of around $7.90 per passenger, less than the sandwich you bought at the gate. Spread across an entire industry that moves more than 5 billion people a year and takes in over $1 trillion in revenue, the profit that is left at the end is astonishingly thin. To understand how that is even possible, you have to follow a single $300 ticket all the way down and watch how many hands reach into it before the airline gets to keep a single cent. And the very first hands are not the airlines at all. They belong to the government and the airport, and they take their share before your carrier is allowed to touch a dollar of it. Before your airline sees any of your money, a stack of mandatory charges is carved straight off the top. In the United States, there is a 7.5% excise tax applied to the base fare. There is a September 11th security fee of $5.60 each way that goes to the TSA. There is a passenger facility charge of up to $4.50 that the airport keeps to pay for its own terminals and runways. And there are flat per segment fees charged on every single takeoff and landing, which means a connecting itinerary is taxed more than a non-stop one. Add it all up, and on a typical $300 round trip, roughly $50 never belongs to the airline at all. The airline is simply a collection agent. It gathers that money from you and passes it straight through to the government and the airport. So before a single wheel has left the ground, we are already down to about $250, and the airline has not yet paid for one drop of fuel. Now the real operating costs begin, and they are enormous. For decades, fuel was the single largest expense an airline faced, and on a long flight it can still swallow roughly a third of every dollar. Consider the sheer scale of it. A wide-body jet crossing an ocean can burn well over a gallon of fuel every second it is in the air. A full transatlantic crossing can consume more than 20,000 gallons of jet fuel. And the airline does not control the price of that fuel. It is set by global oil markets that swing with wars, weather, and politics. When the price of jet fuel moves by even a few cents a gallon, it moves an airline's annual costs by millions of dollars. This is why an airline can plan a perfectly profitable year, and then watch the entire plan evaporate because of an oil shock on the other side of the planet. To defend themselves, airlines gamble on the future price of fuel through complex hedging contracts, essentially betting on oil months in advance. Get the bet right and you save a fortune. Get it wrong and you can lose one. Fuel is the cost they lose the most sleep over, precisely because it is the one they cannot truly control. But something has quietly changed in the last few years. Labor has now overtaken fuel as the largest single cost category for the industry, sitting at around 28% of total expenses. And when you look at what it takes to move one aircraft, that starts to make sense. Every flight is carried by pilots and first officers, cabin crew, mechanics and engineers, gate agents, baggage handlers, dispatchers, schedulers, and the people who de-ice the wings at 5 in the morning in the freezing dark. Every one of them is paid out of your ticket. After labor comes maintenance, which runs to more than a tenth of costs, because a commercial jet is inspected, repaired, and partially rebuilt on a relentless schedule whether it flies full or empty. A single engine overhaul can cost more than a row of luxury cars. None of this pauses when the plane is only half full. The mechanic still gets paid, the inspection still happens, the bill arrives either way. Here is something most passengers never even consider. The airline probably does not own the aircraft you are sitting in. A huge share of the world's commercial fleet is leased, not owned, and even the owned aircraft are usually financed with enormous loans. Aircraft ownership accounts for only about a tenth of operating costs, but it is a bill that arrives every single month, on a full plane or an empty plane, whether the jet is flying or parked on the tarmac. This is the trap at the very heart of the airline business. The costs are almost entirely fixed. The jet, the crew, the gate, the insurance, the financing, they cost nearly the same whether 10 people board or 200. So the entire game collapses into one objective: fill the seats. One empty row can quietly be the difference between a flight that made money and a flight that lost it. Because the costs barely move with the number of passengers, there is a single number that silently rules the whole industry. It is called the break-even load factor. It is the percentage of seats an airline must fill just to cover its costs on a given flight before it earns 1 cent of profit. For many carriers, that number sits somewhere in the high 70s or low 80s. Think carefully about what that means. On a plane with 200 seats, the airline might need to sell roughly 160 of them simply to break even. Everyone sitting in those first 160 seats is paying for the flight to exist at all. The profit, if there is any profit, is riding in the last handful of rows near the back. This single fact explains almost every strange behavior you have ever seen from an airline. It is why they overbook. It is why they will bump you to a later flight. It is why an empty middle seat quietly stings a revenue manager far more than you would ever guess. The margin is not in the plane. It is in the last few passengers who walk down the jet bridge. It also explains one of the most infuriating things about flying. The person sitting right next to you almost certainly paid a completely different price for the identical seat. This is not chaos, and it is not random. It is a discipline called revenue management, and it is one of the most sophisticated pricing systems in any industry on Earth. Airlines slice a single cabin into dozens of invisible fare buckets, each with its own price and its own rules, and computers adjust them constantly based on how fast the flight is filling and how close the departure date is. Book early and flexibly, and you help fill those early break-even seats at a lower price. Book at the last minute when you clearly must travel, and you are buying one of the final profit seats, so you pay dramatically more. Two travelers can walk onto the same jet, sit in the same row, eat the same meal, and have paid a difference of hundreds of dollars, purely because of when and how they booked. The airline is not trying to charge everyone the same fare. It is trying to extract from each traveler roughly the most that particular traveler is willing to pay, and no more. That is how they lift a flight from barely breaking even to actually turning a profit, one carefully priced seat at a time. It is worth asking how an industry this large, this advanced, and this essential ended up with margins thinner than a corner grocery store. The answer is competition, deliberately unleashed. For a long time, air travel in many countries was tightly regulated, with governments deciding who could fly which routes and what they could charge. Fares were high and airlines were comfortable. Then came deregulation, and the market was thrown open. New carriers rushed in, fares collapsed, and flying was transformed from a luxury for the wealthy into something ordinary people did routinely. That was wonderful for passengers and brutal for airlines, because a seat on a plane is close to a commodity. If two airlines fly the same route at the same time, most travelers will simply pick the cheaper one. So airlines are trapped in a permanent price war, each one undercutting the next, competing away almost all of their own profit in the fight to fill seats. The thin margin is not a sign of a badly run business. It is the natural result of selling something that customers shop for almost entirely on price. So let us finally add up all the damage on our $300 ticket. About $50 vanishes into taxes and fees. A large slice goes to fuel. An even larger slice goes to labor. Then maintenance, the aircraft financing, insurance, airport charges, and the plain cost of running a global airline. When the dust settles, the industry keeps that net profit of under $8 per passenger, a margin of roughly 3.9%. And here is the part that should genuinely stop you. That is a good year. That is the industry doing well. In a bad year, a single spike in fuel prices can cut the entire industry's profit in half, which leaves us staring at an obvious and uncomfortable question. If the seat itself barely breaks even, and one bad oil month can wipe out the profit entirely, why would anyone in their right mind run an airline at all? The answer is that the seat was never really the product. The ticket exists to get you onto the plane. The profit comes from everything they sell you around it. The checked bag, the seat with a few extra inches of legroom, priority boarding, the sandwich and the drink. The right to change or cancel your flight. This is called ancillary revenue, and it has quietly grown into a $145 billion business across the industry. And there is a clever, deliberate reason airlines have pushed so hard into it. Remember that 7.5% excise tax? It applies to your fare, but it does not apply to bag fees, seat selection charges, or onboard food. So $1 collected as a bag fee is literally worth more to the airline than $1 collected inside the ticket price, because the government does not take a slice of it. For the ultra-low-cost carriers, this is not a side business at all. It is the main event. At Ryanair, close to 45% of all revenue comes from these extras, not from the fares themselves. The fare gets you in the door. The extras are where the door leads. Look closely and you will notice the design everywhere. The seats are deliberately arranged so that the cheapest fare gives you the least comfortable spot, nudging you to pay a little more. The bag allowance is set just tight enough that many travelers must pay to check. Even the boarding order has been turned into a product you can buy your way up. None of this is accidental. Every one of these small frictions is a carefully placed opportunity to collect another few dollars that the ticket price never captured. But the single most profitable thing an airline sells may not be a flight at all. It may be the loyalty program. When you earn frequent flyer miles, the airline is not simply giving them away out of gratitude. It sells those miles in enormous quantities to banks. The banks then hand them to you as credit card rewards. Every time someone spends on an airline-branded credit card, the bank buys another batch of miles from the airline. For many of the biggest carriers, this stream of cash is larger and far steadier than the actual business of flying planes, because it does not care about fuel prices, or whether any particular flight was full. Some of the largest airlines in the world have quietly admitted that their loyalty program, valued on its own, is worth more than the entire rest of the airline combined. Read that again. The frequent flyer scheme is worth more than the planes, the routes, the brand, and the landing slots put together. In a very real sense, the airline flies planes in order to give the miles somewhere to come from. This is also the secret to why airlines do not simply vanish during a crisis. When almost no one was flying and jets sat parked in the desert by the hundreds, it was these loyalty programs sold in advance to the banks that put billions of dollars of cash onto the books and kept some airlines alive long enough to recover. The flying is the risky, thin margin, weather-beaten part of the business. The fees and the miles are the calm, reliable, high-margin part. One keeps the lights on in good times, the other keeps the company breathing in the worst of times. Passengers see only the flight. The people running the airline see two very different businesses stacked on top of each other, wearing the same logo. This layered model also explains why profitability looks so wildly different around the world. While the global average profit sits near that $8 a passenger, carriers in the Middle East earn far more, closer to $29 per passenger, with margins more than double the industry norm. They sit on long-haul routes that connect entire continents through a single hub. They fly premium heavy cabins full of business travelers, and they treat the long-distance flyer as a genuinely high-value customer rather than a bargain hunter to be squeezed on bag fees. Different strategy, same underlying truth. The winners are not the ones with the absolute cheapest seats. The winners are the ones who understood earliest and most ruthlessly that the seat is only the very beginning of the sale. Once you see the whole structure, the strange economics finally click into place. Airlines compete ferociously to show you the lowest possible headline fare because that fare is the number you actually shop on. They will drive the ticket price down toward almost nothing, knowing the seat is close to break even, because they will make their real money once you have already committed to the trip. On the bag you did not plan to check. On the seat you wanted near your family. On the snack at hour 3. On the card that is now sitting in your wallet. The suspiciously cheap fare is not generosity, and it is not a mistake, and it is not a loss they are eating. It is bait precisely and expertly engineered to get you to say yes. So the next time you are proud of the great deal you found, remember what you are really looking at. The seat is close to free on purpose. The $8 of profit is almost an afterthought, and the true transaction is everything that happens after you have already decided to fly. The airline was never really selling you a flight from one city to another. It was selling you the bag, the seat, the snack, and the credit card, and it handed you the 300-mile-an-hour ride across the country almost as a free sample. Once you can see that, you will never look at a cheap fare the same way again.